So I will talk on something different but related, and I want to thank also Pedro Velasco for the honor to invite me, and I will be very pleased to see this large group of people taking maybe something useful from this presentation as well. The subject is actually born from my own experience. When I started doing HEMA more than 15 years ago, I had some martial experience before that. I had been voyaging through Japanese and Chinese and different kind of styles of Eastern martial arts before I fell on HEMA. I started late though in my life, because as a child I wanted to do martial art, but I was not allowed because my mother said, this is nothing for girls. And this was the typical attitude in the time. I'm now close to 60 years old. I'm speaking about 40, 50 years ago, right? That's already quite some time. When I finally found first martial art and then the discipline which really speaks to me, HEMA, I threw myself completely in it, and you still can get at a certain age quite far, if I can say so myself. So I'm very happy with this, but I encountered nevertheless a lot of problems in dealing with certain techniques and certain things that were required of me. Although I had an excellent trainer, Alwin Goethals, he was the main trainer of the group Sparta in Antwerp. It was one of the first groups, not only in Belgium, but even in Europe, to practice on an organized scale HEMA on a high level. This guy was officer in the Antwerp police force, the SWAT police of Antwerp, so he knew very much about realistic fighting and ringen as well. So I had a very good learning school, but I saw that I bounced on problems. I also was the only girl for almost 10 years in the group. Then I started to see that sometimes girls wanted to join, but they fell out very easily. And I started to ask myself questions, talk about things with other people, read about women in combat sports. I'm a biologist by training and a philosopher, but biology is the thing that came handy in here to understand things. Voila. So what you will see here is what I developed being a trainer now myself for not, let's say, 7, 8 years, not yet a decennium. I tried to develop some understanding. I will talk about this in a more theoretical sense, but also develop a toolkit that is useful for coaches and trainers, female, but especially also male, because most trainers, most instructors, most maestros up to today are male. They will often encounter women that come to their class. They most of the time have a very good intention and mentality, but they see certain things not, and that is why they sometimes still fail to do what they want to do, keep the girl in the class and make her advance properly. We will learn to see certain problems and then define their origin, and we develop a few practical tools that can be used in normal mixed training. You can also establish separate trainings and things like that and competitions to help women, but my philosophy is that in the end, HEMA or martial art is one, and male and female should work together where it is possible and advance together where it is possible. That is the only real way to have a human kind of martial art and not just like the gendered one. Voila. I have to think about changing this as well. So, if I speak here, what does this do? Okay. So women face specific problems when entering HEMA in martial art in general. One thing that you have to understand is that women and girls enter this kind of classes, even if they are very willing and interested, with this cultural idea that women are not supposed to fight from a very young age onwards. So this is a psychological obstacle, and you see this when you do initiations with children. Children, say 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Very important, we will come back to that. Until 12, 13 years, there is no physiological difference between children on the basis of gender at all. Everything you see is cultural, 100%. It's only afterwards that these things come more into being on a biological level. But ask a child give me a give me a box in the stomach. You can make nice muscle and give. A boy will give you a box, a real one, not a good one, maybe not a technical one, but you will feel it. A girl will do something like this. She will not put herself behind it. She will not. Often they will giggle. This kind of stuff. All of this, like having the feeling I'm doing something I'm not supposed to do and I cannot do. Of course, from a purely physical point of view, this is complete nonsense. She is perfectly capable to give you a nice box. There is already a whole complex of ideas and attitudes which are ingrained in this body at work at that young age that incapacitate this person to do something competent. They are seen, even when at the level of children, these differences do not manifest themselves very strongly, or not at all, not in a significant way. They are seen and see themselves as small and fragile. I go to the swimming pool, I see a family with boys and girls there. The boy is probably 6, 7 years old, the girl is 10 years old. The boy is a little bit teasing his sister, it's clear that they are sister and brother. And the girl is like this, she's a head taller than him because she's a few years older. She's like this, and the guy is like not seriously, but hitting her. And I see it, and I say to the girl, why do you let him hit you? Just give him one back. And she looks at me like, what is she saying? And she gives the boy he was in complete shock. And the mother was looking at me, what are you doing? But then she was smiling. And I was a bit embarrassed afterwards because I don't have to interfere, of course, with this. But this kind of typical situations, it's like she could have pushed him away like that because she was simply older and taller. Voila. Women very often, because they feel this incompetence, they feel this incapacity, and it makes them feel underestimated and underestimate themselves, especially the latter one, and because of that they have the impression that other people underestimate them too, and this is often the case. So I'm now just describing typical situations. There are always exceptions, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something structural. There are also boys who suffer from this. But for boys, it is an exceptional, an individual situation. For girls, this is structural. Even if the girl is by nature very strong and very sportive and very willing, she will encounter this kind of stuff. So very often you see, and I'm a trainer myself, I put a lot of energy in making sure that ladies and girls know that they are welcome in the class. The fact that they see a female name as instructor, now I have 2 co-instructors, of which one is a boy, but that's not the point. They see the female name, they are already a little bit more inclined to come, but even then, it is very, how would I say, it is not easy, and in the beginning I have to put extra work in them to keep them in the class. Even, I said so, even if you have good intentions, it is not easy to keep them in the class. Why? What you very often see, this is such a beautiful place. Come on, do it. This is such a beautiful place, but it's so unpractical. I would wish to have a bit of space here, but it's very, very limited, so I hope I'm not going to do something stupid. But girls very often, when you ask them, make an Oberhau. Something like this, right? The upper body coordination of the person, very often, or they don't seem to be capable to keep the structure in the movements, even when they are well developed and things like that. If you see girls running, very often it's something like, I exaggerate now, of course, but it's not like running, it's like more displacing yourself. It's sometimes even a bit funny. So this comes from somewhere. This is not done by nature. We are not going... Can you please do what I want? Thank you very much. Whoa. Yeah, there we go. Many of these behaviors, comportments, we ascribe them easily to girl as such, as a nature, but it has almost nothing to do with nature. It is the effect of the way we learn young children to behave in their bodily composure in public space. And we will see where this comes from. It's very easy to understand once you have seen that there is a problem, and it's also possible to overcome, but if you don't, the person remains incapacitated. Of course, adult people, on the level of adult people, there are more outspoken differences between men and women. But in our cultural context, these are strongly exaggerated compared to many other cultural situations. If you take a general population, even in our part of the world, for 80%, you cannot decide on the basis of length, for instance, whether this is a man or a girl, a man or a woman. For 80%, you cannot make a separation on the level of things like body length, what the gender of the person is. Only the 10% outliers will give you a significant chance that a very small person is more often a woman, the very big person is more often a man. But even then, for 80%, it doesn't give any signification at all. And if you go to another part of the world, I went to China to do a stage in Shaolin Kung Fu at some moment. Suddenly, I think I must have changed gender because I was taller than 90% of the men in the space. It's very weird, but I was just myself. So it is even geographically defined, and then you see still some differences. But there is a very clear relativeness to this, which has to do with how we eat, how we behave, how we move, and things like that. There is also a very interesting other thing in the teenage years. Of course, the male voice changes, it turns, it becomes deeper. This is not the case for the female, so this is one of the few real biological differences that you can see. But you see that often children 5, 6 years old already start to speak remarkably different. Male way of speaking versus female way of speaking has nothing to do with biology, it's only cultural. Just to make you clear that culture shapes bodies. Culture is not just in your mind, culture shapes bodies. We have to understand this. And our culture, like most cultures, still, even with all the emancipation that we have, it is emancipation of the mind, not of the body, not yet. Emancipation of the female body still has to start. 100 years ago, the scientific theory was that women were biologically not competent enough to go to university. Their weaker female brain, you know. Now, of course, after a long struggle, women make emancipation, go to school, study, become inventors, become scientists, become everything. It turned out that this was nonsense. On the level of the body, this is still the case. It is still the case that we think that a lot of things which are the consequence of cultural behavior are biological and therefore unsurmountable, uncurable, which makes women the weaker sex. So, and of course, then you have all these theories, which once were considered scientific, but which are now, how would I say, to a large extent deconstructed. Like, yeah, of course, the man is in evolution the stronger because he was the hunter and the woman was sitting at the fire and making the food. We now know that there is a whole revision of archaeological evidence and prehistorical findings and things going on, and we now know that this is bullshit, that you had women that hunted large game just as men did, that you had women riding horses, that you had, all these things existed. I'm not going into that now, but our vision of history in this respect is also completely wrong. So our intention, also with women, our typical idea to think about things is not based on facts, but on cultural mythology. It's important to understand that, to see that you can do consistent little things that help overcome this. And this is what we want. We want everybody to give the chance to become better. Okay, let's go to the next one. That's nice. Please. Yeah. Is that the next one? Okay. Oh yeah, this is it. No, just.
No, is this one?
No. And then, yeah, okay. I take this because, zeg. I take this because, yeah, now you hear me. But you hear me without it as well, right? Yeah, okay. I have few of these illustrations to make clear what the impact of imagery is. And I take the caricatural version, which is American Hollywood cinema, because of its caricatural nature, it gives us an insight in the normal ideas in the culture, but then blown up, right? So even if you have these movies with the heroes are incredibly tall and they have ridiculous amounts of muscle, etc. And sometimes you even have a female hero, but she will not have the body that indicates that she is almost superhuman of strength or something like that. If a female hero has strength, it's because of this uncanny magical kind of property, apparently, because she is very tiny and very small, and of course the guy is in all senses exaggeratedly more big, and the only thing that a woman in more abundance has than the man is tits. You would think that her muscles and her brain is in her tits because they tend to be enormous. This is also a nice one. I mean, try to find the female heroes. There is one, you see her there. It's Wonder Woman. And what do you see in the first place? The nice big breasts. Huh? Nothing against big breasts, but you're not going to beat somebody with them. Alea, maybe not. Next. Yeah, this I already mentioned. Biologically speaking, until 12, 13 years, it can vary a little bit. There is no physiological difference between boys and girls whatsoever of any significance. Everything in performance, strength, and behavior that you see before that age is 100% cultural. Put that in your mind. If we would educate our children on this level of physical competence in a similar way from the young age, a lot of the problem that girls afterwards have would simply disappear because the basis is laid on that age. You can construct and build and specialize afterwards, but the basis is laid on this young age. Yeah, I said this already about this 80% of typically bodily properties which are not genderable except for the outliers. And even then only for given populations, as I said with the China anecdote. Yes, we can go on. Yeah. Okay, I just added this. It's actually referring to the posters that we looked, the male gaze. Why are these images like that we have? You see a poster for a film, even with normal characters, not heroes, just normal characters. A man and a woman, they have an adventure or an affair, or I do not know what. Typically, the man will be at least a head taller than the woman. If you have a couple and the man and the woman are the same height, or even worse, the woman is a bit taller than the man, very often people will find it very strange and they will giggle about it and they will have a feeling that this is not normal. But of course it's normal in the sense that there are many situations in which there is a woman which is somewhat taller or as tall as the man. But very important is that our eating cultures also tend to exaggerate this. If you take a diet book and you look at the composition of the meals for the woman and those of the man, very often you will not find any meat in those for the woman. Like if women belong to another zoological species and they are vegetarian, all by nature, which they are evidently not. Why do men eat meat? Because they are strong, they have a lot of muscles, and they move a lot, and they do heavy work, and the woman doesn't. So you don't need that. Now, if you feed like that, your bodily development will be affected by it. This is even strengthened by the whole social media culture that we have now. And I think this is just a hypothesis. I cannot claim that what I'm now going to say is a scientific statement, but I think that this is one of the reasons, the fact that this is even enhanced in the media image, that so many young girls struggle with their gender and with their sexual identity and have so many problems with eating disorders and things like that. It's even enhanced instead of diminished. Even if we are so proud about the emancipation that we think is taking place. Yeah, I can go. I love this picture. I did not make it. I found it somewhere. We find this ridiculous, right? But, this kind of position, you have to try to do it in real life. I mean, you never see it with the men because it's completely artificial. It only has as function to make the woman more attractive for the male gaze. It is completely ridiculous, but this is, I like this. Just for the presentation, I would not like my men to show up like that, be sure of it. We're not going to do mathematics, but just as a reminder what statistics actually is. The whole big thing from, say, 2.5 to 2, maybe 1.5, everything in between is the normal population. The little points are the outliers. There you find the real big differences that you can biologically ground. All the rest is, to a large extent, cultural. Yeah, that's an interesting one. There is one biologically measurable difference that is significant, and this is the composition of the body in the sense of fat. There is no such thing as a male muscle and a female muscle. It doesn't exist. Muscles are the same with women and men, but the composition of the total body weight in the woman contains more fat. This is important if you would work in sports competitions where you have mixed competitions and you want to gender the weight, you would need to take this into account. In Savate, for instance, one of the few disciplines where they sometimes have mixed competitions, for this reason, they let the woman fight in the lower weight category. They compensate the fat for saying she weighs, say, 70 kilos, but we count only 60 kilos because the rest is fat that the man doesn't have. So they let the woman and the man fight in one weight difference, one weight category difference, and then you measure this out more or less, which is a very simple way of, I'm not pleading for introducing weight categories in HEMA, be sure of it, but I just tell you that some disciplines are aware to some extent that there is something weird, and they try to account for this and take this into account when they develop rules. No. So the way that muscle and fat interact during exercise greatly influences both strength and performance, and that process does vary between men and a woman in a variety of ways. So fat plays a role, but a woman and a man with similar training and similar amounts of muscle and fat will perform similarly. So it is not that there is some biologically essential difference. It is simply a fact of training properly and taking these differences into account if you want to compare people. That's also very interesting. If you find... Is it? Oh yeah, okay. If you find a skeleton outside of context, and context means objects or attributes, that means culture. It is within a large error degree not possible to identify its gender correctly, which is a problem for forensic medicine. Forensic medicine is what you have when there is a crime scene and you want to know who this person is. So, in archaeology, this is a problem as well, although they now find a solution, namely you can use some aspect of the teeth where you can find some DNA and then you might now gender it. And this is how they find that certain skeletons that have been characterized as male in the history, archaeological skeletons that were found in graves full of weapons, for instance, and then there appeared some of them to be women instead of men. Before they were gendered as men. Why? You find the sword, it must be a man. The nice example is that probably everybody has heard of it, of the Birka warrior, one of the biggest graves, a boat full or a grave full of weapons, and there is a skeleton in there, and then they say, okay, this must have been a man. Apparently, it is not a man, it is a woman. So they have to actually rethink this whole history because, there are more examples than only that one. And the whole idea of what the Viking culture is has to be retaught in the context of this kind of findings. But there is always, it took years, even with the DNA proof present, it took years before the archaeological community really accepted this finding. A very interesting thing is also that in some parts of the Caucasus and Russia, you have these Scythian peoples, where they have now found dozens of mounds in which female warriors are buried, and probably that is the origin of the myth of the Amazons. We're not sure of that, but this is again a proof. You have African tribes where whole armies of women warriors existed, things like that. There is much more examples like that than we think, but we're not aware of it because it's kept out of the official history. During the Crusades, the Pope wrote a bull, an official letter, saying it is forbidden that women dress as men and fight in crusades. I mean, if you have such a bull, this kind of typical official letter, you can imagine that a lot of times this happened because otherwise no Pope is going to worry about this, right? And we find this confirmed in the testimonies of the Muslim historians who write about the fact that if an army retracts and there are dead people on the battlefield, people had the custom to go and take the weapons and the armor, everything of value from the body, and they said, "Oh no, there are female bodies in here. What is this?" And then, of course, it was said, "Yeah, but this is the Muslims. They write negative things about the Christians." No, they were simply describing what they found on the battlefield. So our whole image of history is distorted in this respect. Always leading back to this idea that women don't fight, women are not competent to do so, women are weak. Yeah, okay. This is the Birka grave. Yeah, okay, that's one of those Amazon. Look at the legs. You see the legs? I mean, the person is used like sitting on a horse his whole life, but it's a female person. Yeah, go. Okay. As I said, strong factor is culture and conventions. There is also another thing, and this is about taking putting your body in space. If you sit on a train or on a bus or on the metro, observe the comportment of women and men, sitting or standing. Women are sitting like this, or standing like this. If there are more than one person, especially male, in the neighborhood. Men simply take their space. I'm not even talking about these this. Your knees fall inside. Look at girls in the training, new girls, even experienced girls. Look at the position of their knees and their legs. They almost always fall inside. And then it is said, yes, that is because women have a bigger pelvis than men, and so their knees fall inside. Yeah, like if Mother Nature would have made women like a kind of handicapped breathing stove for a man. No, it's not true. It's because we have the tendency to go and sit like that. And why would we sit like this? What would be a good reason to sit like this? And not just like this, which is making you ready to do whatever you want, step, run, whatever. What could be a reason to close your legs like this and preferably put a lock on them? Skirts in itself are not the reason, but yes. Not showing what's under the skirt, because you already have to look what's under the skirt, even, yeah. But indeed, it is seen as non-decent, covered as not elegant, but seen as non-decent. This actually means, I'm not available, don't rape me. That's what this means. It's kind of protection. And women continue to do it not only when they have skirts, but also when they wear trousers. If you have this, so that really, if you train, and we will, tomorrow in the workshop, we will do exercises with people, everybody, men and women, observing and then finding ways to gently and respectfully help people to find the right position of their body parts so that they can stand stable and present in space. This is a work that takes weeks, sometimes months, and at some point you do this consistently, but in a very non-obvious, non-intrusive way. There are perfect ways to do that. We will practice this tomorrow. After 6 months, a year, you see this person suddenly click, and this person takes the space in a natural way. And the whole thing is gone. The whole awkwardness is gone. This is the kind of work where I'm talking about. But this is not natural, also not for a woman. That's what's natural, also for a woman. Same thing with shoulders. I talked about the men eat meat. Tonus versus muscle. If you train, if you go to a fitness, or if you are an athlete, but also athletics, just normal athletics, and especially when you do body culture. For a man, the idea is to gain muscle. For a woman, it is maximum to have tonus. If you see muscle on a woman, it's considered ugly. Yeah? Of course, if you train, you develop muscles. That's the nature of the whole thing, and that's also the idea. But you cannot do this, and I'm not talking about bodybuilding and becoming with all kinds of hormones extra. No, but just the fact that you develop, for instance, I had to work for years to develop a little bit of upper body shoulders. I used to be like this. And now I cannot even do this anymore. Not that I'm such a big person, but if I buy a t-shirt, a female model in my measure, I have a problem to get my shoulders and my arms in it, because the place where the arms belong is like this. Apparently, women are not supposed to have any meat, any muscle here. It's really embarrassing. If I want to have the female model of a typical Hima t-shirt, I have to ask for the XX large, not because I'm so fat, but because otherwise I cannot even put my shoulders in it. Just because I have a little bit of training, right? The aesthetic body idea for a man is like this triangle. Okay, you can have the ridiculous one, but just a normal triangle. It looks strong and competent. For a woman, it is actually the same, but she cannot have it by developing the upper body, because a woman with shoulders is considered ugly, unelegant. Why? If you look strong, it means that you can probably resist certain things. You can push, you can pull, and you can lift. If you don't have an upper body, you can't do these things. If you have an upper body, you take your sword and you're capable of making coordinated movements, keeping a line, putting a thrust, all this kind of stuff, giving a punch, all this kind of stuff, this stable triangle, right? But the beauty ideal for the female body is also the triangle. So how do you get the triangle? Well, I'm old enough to remember in the 80s, when you had your veston of the costume, you put some mousse, some spongy parts under the shoulders so that they look bigger than they really are. It looked really ridiculous, but it was a fashion in the time. So you have shoulders, but they are not real. Or 100 or 200 years ago, you simply make the belly small with the corset. And you make the corset so small that you get the triangle. The result often was that you broke ribs or you had other health damage, but you looked at least again like the triangle. But the body was not developing in any way. Yeah, let's go. A picture from some talk show. As I said, all the women sit like, and with the skirts, but even not without the skirt, they're all sitting somehow like this. I mean, it's really, if you start to look at it and if you start to see it, it becomes really embarrassing to notice it. If I look at the television program and I see this, I really cringe because, there is no need for this, right? It's purely cultural convention. Ugh. Okay, next. This is interesting. This is an ancient Greek vase, 5th century or something before Christ. What do you see?
Let's spread evenly.
Yes, that's one thing. They have more or less the same leg position. Good remark. I didn't even think of that. They can stand like this or like this, but they have the same body position. That's true. But something else. Yes. There is no length in the body of the women and the men. Now, Greece was really not an egalitarian society. Forget that. Women were not considered equal of men and had not the same rights of men. The only thing that makes clear that this is a woman and a man, apart from maybe the garb, is the color of the skin, and it's not even always the case. But the length is the same, the position of the feet is the same. There is nothing that physiologically or biologically in a ridiculous way indicates that this is a man and this is a woman in a completely non-egalitarian society. By the way, it's also interesting to know that there were Olympic Games for women, the Games of Hera, every 4 years for the whole of Greece. We hardly know anything about it. Why not? Ask me. But it's an historical fact that there were games for women too. This is just the same. This is Achilles fighting with Penthesilea, the queen of the Amazons. Achilles beats her, but you do not see that she has muscles in her arms. She has a nice athletic body. She is clearly from more or less the same height. She is simply beaten in a fair fight. Right? This is an inegalitarian society. Think about the posters of the American movies that I showed you in the beginning and realize what the difference is. So, cultural conventions have a deep impact if it is how you're educated, how you sit, how you stand, how you present yourself, what kind of sports you do, what you eat, how you look at yourself. All these things have an extremely deep impact on how you function as a body, a living body, a sentient body in space, determined by cultural things. And then you get this idea, he is doing something like a girl, like, the bad way, the flabby way, the incompetent way. There is an interesting article by Marion Young, already from the 80s, Throwing Like a Girl. And she reviews biological and physiological literature studies about the fact that boys and girls already from a young age, and we can go to the next one. I'm not going to read the complete quotation, but the point is that when boys are asked to do something like throwing a ball, you see that they engage their whole body in it. They use their whole body in a free way, even if they're not trained and not really competent. They engage everything they have to do so. Girls don't do this. They do something like this. And Young makes the correct analysis, based on the literature, that the girls actually sabotage themselves. It is not something natural, it is something unconscious, but they sabotage themselves in the movement. Wait. Young argues that because these children were prepubescent and physically quite similar, their differing approaches were due to differing understandings of body comportment. Simone de Beauvoir's account of women's existence as constrained, the misconception that women's anatomies determined their being as unfree, not freely moving, not freely taking the space. So then the self-fulfilling prophecy is, I am not capable. I cannot do this. I am not fit for this. I don't like this. On what level? Muscular coordination, position, poise, and bearing. Contributing to the idea that woman takes a constricted space. She makes herself as small as possible. Okay? In the 2000s, you have to imagine this, the World Athletics Federation, now you have held this discussion about transgender in sports. I'm not going to enter this discussion now. It's a complex subject and it's worth a separate kind of presentation. But because of this, probably about whatever idea that female sports is in any case inferior to male sports. The Athletics Federation introduced the notion that for long distance running, like marathons, there would be the world record that women would run in a course where there are also men would not count. Because it would be an unfair advantage. Women on themselves are so much weaker that they cannot get the result if there are not men. Now there came a lot of protest, and now still today you have 2 world records for marathons for women. One in only female courses and one in a mixed course, which is of course completely ridiculous, but this is still now the case. Wait. On the contrary, you see that swimmers that start to train finally, because you have to understand that we have a historical delay in the study and the training of women's bodies, which is maybe 500 or 1,000 years. Now, since a few decennia, we start to study the female body and develop scientific training methods and things like that, finally. So you see some swimmers, for instance, who the difference between the records gets always closer and closer. And these come, this was a discussion in the 2012 and 2016 Olympics. These women don't look like women, they are men. And it was not because they were trans or something like that, simply because they have a muscular body and they swim strongly. So the point is not that they are men, but if you train professionally and seriously, you develop a body that goes with it, and you make performances on that level. So even now, this stays difficult to accept the fact that not maybe that there is no difference at all, that's not the matter, but that the differences are very small and in many sports completely irrelevant. If you see some disciplines like CrossFit and the Ninja Warrior thing in America, where there are no gender differences, you see that these women really develop the athletic bodies, and I don't say that we have all to do that, but if you want to perform on a top level in these sports, you develop a body which is muscular and strong and athletic. And then you will be able to do everything. In Olympic gymnastics, all the disciplines that lead to the development of an upper body for the women are outside of the curriculum. You have no rings, you have no equal bars, and you have no horse, like you have for the men. Why? Are women incapable of doing it? Of course not. In disciplines like CrossFit and in Ninja Warrior, they do it. But if you have that, you will develop a strong, athletic-looking upper body, and this is considered not elegant, not female, and it's not allowable. So even there, you see this. As I said, I'm not now going to enter the subject of trans because it's not even properly defined what trans means. My discussion here is about individuals that still identify somehow as woman and feel like woman. I do not want to disrespect the rights of transgenders. Absolutely not. I think it's a very important debate and combat. And I think that the only solution is that we develop in the future more mixed competitions and mixed, how would I say, training methods and things like that, where you can avoid the fact that a man is going to define what is a woman. What is if you want to do athletics or sports on a high level, as a woman, you have a definition. You are a woman and you are not. For a man, it doesn't exist. You're a man, you're accepted. And what is the definition for a woman? Today, very often, the level of testosterone in your blood. So you need to have an average level of testosterone in a body that has been going through a culturally determining procedure as the one that we saw. So clearly the levels will be lower than that they naturally would be. But then you have to be average. Well, of course, a top sporter is by definition almost not average. The result is, and these definitions are always made by men, because all the big sports federations, international things, etc., are filled with mostly white men. And they determine this. What is the result? That even clearly biological women, which are maybe not just completely average, but biological women are refused to compete because they have too much of a concentration of blah, 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 which is completely hilarious. This person does not define as anything else than a woman. She biologically is a woman, but she has for some reason a little bit more than somebody else. Okay, not admissible. This is completely, if you think about it, you imagine that you have not enough testosterone, or you have too much estrogen, or your tits are a little bit too big. You're not a man. Out. Nobody would even think for 2 seconds and accept that. For a woman, it's normal. So then you have this typical discourse, yeah, but we the men, want to protect women's sports. And we want to protect it. Protect it from what? From making the gap in performance as little as possible, I guess. I cannot imagine, if you look at what the Athletics Federation did, what other kind of reasoning can be behind it. The difference by nature is so big and it should stay there. While what I would say is the difference is way too big for cultural reasons. It can become much smaller, and we would do everything to get our girls and our women on the level that they can aspire to be. In some situations, it will maybe not be that of the same, but in many situations, it will be, and it will be better for everybody if we could do that. Yeah. So what if in my training experience as a coach and as a trainer, and this is going to sound quite rough, and of course I do not say this to my students, and I do not have this as an attitude in mind, but I consider my girls like some boys, like the typically computer nerds that are sitting all the time behind their screen and are bullied in class. They have the same kind of bodily issues. I consider them as handicapped. Not by nature and not in an unsurmountable way, but because of what I described before. And I shut my mouth about this, and I will work in a specific way with certain exercises, certain corrections on body postures, certain types of encouragement. We will tomorrow in the workshop see, and also learn how to deal with these other bodies, gaining confidence. It can take months to a year, but the result is there. I work with them like that, and then they, at least to a large extent, can overcome this handicap. A French guy who came to my lecture in Dijon about this subject told me, you are doing something like for this kid, say a male kid, but from, say, African descent or something, and he goes to secondary school. In France, in Belgium, it's the same, I guess in Spain also, and they send him to professional school. Why? Because, that's the only one thing what they can do, what they are good for. So he goes to professional school and he finishes it, and he discovers that he loves mathematics so much, and that he actually has a gift for mathematics. And now you can say, like often you get this, but I treat all my pupils equally. Many of the good male coaches, the honestly, intentionally good male coaches say, but I treat everybody equally. But this person was never treated equally and comes there while he should be there, but he comes there, or she, and if you treat them now equally, the result is not that, but that. You say to this kid, you can go to university, study mathematics. Of course he will fail. He lacks the pre-education needed to do this successfully. Not because of his fucking skin color, but because he was sent to the wrong school for the wrong reasons. The same is true with sportive performances. So you have to treat unequally in the beginning, in a discreet way, and there are many ways you can do that, in order to give the opportunity to this person to catch up. Maybe he or she will never bridge completely the gap, but at least to the extent that he or she will be able to perform on the highest level. And that's the only thing that interests us, I suppose. Right? So that's the whole philosophy behind the approach that I want to develop and for which I will present the practical toolkit tomorrow. So, the first rule is forget about biology on this level. There are so many things that we have to do to take all the cultural factors out that it doesn't even make sense now to try to determine what precisely is biological. I don't fucking care. Let's make work of getting everybody on the highest level that this person aspires, can, and want to do. We need a program, a toolbox to catch up the lost time, often a lifetime, to get up to level. Compare programs, that I have said. Okay, next. So what is in the toolkit? Things like bodily awareness, learning to be close in the presence of other bodies without freezing or making yourself small, and things like that. Gaining trust, learning to work with gendered bodies in an ungendered way, in an objective way. This is good for boys and girls, by the way, because of course the culture also affects boys. Boys don't see this, but they're also affected by this negative spiral created around girls. And they very often are very awkward themselves as well. It's hampering their own development as well. So I think it's good, not only for the girls, it's absolutely necessary, but for the boys as well, to do this kind of work of emancipation of the female body. I do things like making people scream and hit things sometimes. I also make them in a very soft way, getting used to the fact that your body is touched in certain ways. You build this up very slowly. You always ask if people are fine. If you see that there is a problem, you don't force it, you work in another way, but you continue this work in a very consistent way. I also always in the beginning of the year, I tell the people that I will work on this. I do not give a long lecture like now. I just give a few small remarks and I make sure everybody feels welcome. And I also, and this is a very useful thing in Asian martial art, you know that the place where you train is considered to some extent like, maybe sacred is exaggerated, but it's a special space. Yeah, you greet when you enter, and there is often a picture of the founder of the discipline and things like that. So you are leaving normal society and you're entering a special place. I do this too. I have no picture from somebody, but I just make a kind of ceremony, very short in the beginning, and I say we're now in an other space than the normal space, and here things can happen like, and then I walk to somebody, I lift the person up and I place him a meter further down. No problem. Because we're not in the normal situation. So you can come close to each other and touch each other, and you're nevertheless in a sacred and hence safe space. Without all the political bullshit around it, you create a safe space where rules are in application and where you can do all these things without people having to discuss about politics and gender and nya. It's hands-on work. Yeah, I will not say that I'm against any kind of separate training or workshop or against any kind of separate competition in certain contexts, but it should not be the rule, and we should avoid to have only obligatory gender separation. We're not in the 19th Victorian century, we're in the 21st century. We can do better than that, and we should do better than that. Yep. Yeah, I mentioned a few of these. We will see them tomorrow. Okay? This I discussed already. Yeah, things like pushing up and things like that. Most girls can't do it, and then it said they're not capable to do that. You have all varieties of intermediate exercise, even for boys who have a big body, but especially for the girls. You have all kinds of varieties of doing correct push-ups, from very easy to very difficult, and you can build them in your normal training, and this is true for a lot of warming up exercises. For me, it's now like a normal routine, and you see people make progress. Instead of saying, okay, it's okay that you don't do it because you can't. But with me, it's never the case that somebody can do something not, is free from doing something because they can't. There is nobody except when they miss all body parts that cannot do this. I find an exercise on the level of capacity of this person and I make them do it, and their trust and confidence grows. If I always keep them outside, they will feel weaker and weaker and weaker, better and better and better, and at some point they will just drop out. Yeah. Yeah. Positioning yourself in space, I will not talk about this a lot because tomorrow we will have the workshop, but it has to do where your knees are, especially when you take a fighting position in line with your toes, and that you have this stability, that you have the stable triangles on which you move and which you use to do certain coordination exercises. I have a whole program actually, which is part of my normal training that addresses these things. Calf muscles are also one of those things, okay? Yeah, these are made by Diminishes for me. I love it very much. You see the two stable triangles. This is for the wrestling class, but it's a general principle, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Push-ups. You can do all variants with knees on the ground, against the wall, on the chair. All possibilities. As long as you keep this architecture, you're fine, and people will really develop. Next. Yeah, that's for the sword. Next. Okay, and tomorrow we will see a lot of examples also with the sword, without the sword, with the sword. We will not hurt each other, but we will give each other the feeling that we could do something effective without creating fear or without creating frustration or without creating this feeling of incapacity. And I invite you all tomorrow to the workshop where you can follow up on this on a more practical level. I think we are then there. Okay. I never oblige somebody to do something. I always invite them, and I always have variations of things to do. Pushing boundaries is okay, but you have to do it in an accompanied and trustful way. Repetition, getting used, but in an interesting way, not making people bored. Encouragement. I'm always positive. Even when I'm demanding. I can be severe, but I'm always encouraging. I will never give somebody the feeling, what the fuck are you doing here? Something else. Sorry. Oof. Sorry. This is one of the things they get 5 push-ups for. If you say sorry during the course because you touch somebody. Of course, if you have an accident and something happens, it's something else. But you know this. Oh, excuse me. That's what you're here for. Please assume it, right? You make a joke. Yeah, but no, you cannot say sorry. Okay is okay. Are you okay? That's good. Voila. And not blah, blah, blah too much. A training is for working, not for discussing and talking. All female bodies. Look at that. All female bodies. Beautiful female bodies. This is also a female body. A CrossFit athlete. No doping, no artificial stuff. Just a CrossFit athlete. One more. Voila. And I want to close with here. And I thank you very much for your attention.